We've all been there, that soul-crushing can't breathe kind of heartbreak where the world feels like it stopped spinning the moment they walked out. And if you're honest, you're not just hurt, you're stuck. Stuck hoping for closure, stuck replaying every moment, stuck wondering what you did wrong or how you could fix it. But let's get real. We often go through a breakup holding on to the hope that one day the other person will give us the closure we crave. Maybe it'll be through a text, a long message, a sudden call where they finally say all the things we wanted to hear. Maybe they'll admit they were wrong, that they miss us, that we mattered more than they showed. We convince ourselves that if we just get that one final conversation, we'll be able to breathe again. But here's what people rarely tell you: closure doesn't come from them. It never truly has. The real kind of closure, the one that brings peace and forward momentum, comes from within, from a moment of self-honesty, not from their apology or explanation. The truth is, waiting for someone else to give you closure is like handing them the remote to your emotional life. You're letting them decide when you get to heal, when you get to move on, when your pain finally gets validated. That's a dangerous kind of power to give someone who's already walked away. And even if you do get that final conversation, it often doesn't bring the comfort we imagined. They might say things that confuse you more. They might give you partial truths, or worse, they might just be trying to ease their own guilt, not genuinely help you heal. We have to stop expecting people who hurt us to be the ones who heal us. That's not their role anymore. The same person who broke your heart is not going to be the architect of your recovery. And when you realize that, you start to pull your power back. You start to understand that closure isn't a moment, it's a decision. It's the decision to stop waiting. It's the decision to stop obsessing over the why and start asking yourself, what now? So how do you do that? It starts with accepting that you may never get all the answers. And that has to be okay, because sometimes people leave and don't know how to explain it. Sometimes they don't have the emotional maturity to communicate. Sometimes they don't even fully understand their own actions. And you chasing their explanation becomes another form of self-abandonment, another way you keep yourself tangled in something that's no longer serving you. Closure is also about facing the uncomfortable truth that even if they came back today with all the answers, it wouldn't erase the pain. It wouldn't change the fact that they still left, that the relationship ended, that you were hurt. Their words can't undo history. You're not looking for closure, you're looking for reassurance. You're looking for a way to believe that you were lovable, worthy, and enough. And the harsh, beautiful truth is, you always were. Their inability to see that doesn't change the fact that it's true. When you stop searching for closure outside of yourself, you start creating space to reclaim your peace. You let yourself grieve without keeping one eye on your phone. You begin to reframe your experience not as a tragic ending, but as a necessary redirection. You no longer make your healing conditional on their return or validation. You stop tying your story to their behavior, and you start writing your own ending. It's a shift in mindset from "I need them to explain this" to "I trust myself to move on even without all the answers." And that shift changes everything. You go from feeling powerless to powerful. You stop chasing and you start choosing. And that choice to choose yourself, to stop waiting, to let go without needing their permission, that is what real closure looks like. After a breakup, pain becomes the one thing that feels honest. It hits you in waves, sometimes quietly, sometimes like a storm that leaves you breathless. It's natural to want to run from it, numb it, or distract yourself. But the truth is, healing doesn't happen by avoiding the pain. It happens by facing it. Still, there's a fine line between feeling your pain and feeding it, and learning to tell the difference is one of the most powerful steps in moving on. Feeling the pain means allowing yourself to experience the emotions as they come. It means admitting that you're hurting, that something meaningful was lost, and that your heart is struggling to recalibrate. It means crying when you need to cry. It means writing things down, talking to someone you trust, or just sitting with the weight of it, not to punish yourself, but to honor what you've been through. Suppressing that pain doesn't make it go away. It buries it where it starts to rot and show up in other areas of your life, yourself, esteem, your trust, your energy, even your future relationships. But feeling pain isn't the same as feeding it. Feeding the pain is when you start to dwell in it, not to heal, but to stay connected to the person or the story. It's when you replay the breakup over and over in your head, imagining different outcomes, rewriting conversations, or stalking their social media to find some piece of information that will give you a hit of hope or confirmation. Feeding the pain turns grief into a cycle, one where you become emotionally addicted to your own suffering, not because you enjoy it, but because it's the only thing that still feels linked to them. This is the trap. Pain can start to feel like proof that the relationship mattered, so we hold onto it like a relic of something sacred. We tell ourselves, if I stop hurting, it means it wasn't real, but that's not true. You can honor the past without living in it. Pain is part of the process, but it is not the destination. It's a passageway, not a permanent home. The danger of feeding the pain is that it makes you forget your own agency. It makes you think you're helpless, stuck in this state until the hurt magically disappears. But healing is an active choice. It doesn't mean pretending you're fine. It means choosing to move through the emotions, not circle around them endlessly. It means setting boundaries with your own thoughts. Not every memory deserves your attention right now. Not every what if needs to be entertained. You have to be able to recognize when feeling has turned into obsessing and gently but firmly redirect your mind. A huge part of moving on is learning to sit with the ache without letting it define you. You can acknowledge your heartbreak without building your whole identity around it. You're allowed to hurt and still get up in the morning. You're allowed to grieve and still say no to rereading old messages. You're allowed to miss them and still decide they're not right for you. When you stop feeding the pain, you give yourself the chance to heal from it. You begin to notice moments of light, small joys, laughter that returns unexpectedly. The pain doesn't disappear all at once, but it becomes less sharp, less constant. And one day, you'll realize you went a whole morning without thinking about them. Then a day, then a week. That's how healing works, quietly, steadily, as long as you stop pouring fuel on the fire and instead let the flames burn out on their own. One of the most overlooked yet powerful steps in moving on from a breakup is removing the person's presence from your daily life. It sounds simple, but in practice, it's one of the hardest things to do because it forces you to let go of not just the relationship, but the comfort of proximity. When someone's been a major part of your day-to-day, the texts, the inside jokes, the routines, their absence can feel like a missing limb, but keeping pieces of them in your life, even in small ways, keeps the wound open. Healing doesn't happen while you're still living in a museum of memories. We like to convince ourselves that staying connected, keeping them on our socials, looking at their posts, even rereading old messages is harmless. Sometimes we say we're just curious or not ready to block them yet. But deep down, we know the truth. Every time we let their face show up in our feed or reread something they once said, we're reattaching the emotional thread. We're reopening the door for hope, confusion, or self-doubt to creep back in. It doesn't matter how strong you think you are seeing a story, a post, or a comment from them will trigger something, and that something delays your progress. Removing them from your daily life doesn't mean you're bitter. It doesn't mean you hate them. It means you are choosing your peace over their presence. It's a boundary, not an act of revenge. When someone is no longer emotionally available to you, they should not be mentally or digitally accessible either. Block if you need to. Mute if that feels more manageable. Unfollow without guilt. Delete the number if it helps you stop looking at it late at night. You're not being dramatic, you're being deliberate. This also goes beyond technology. It's about your physical environment and your routines too. If their sweatshirt is still in your drawer, if pictures are still up on your wall, if your Spotify playlist is full of your songs, those are daily landmines for your emotional well-being. Go through your space and take a hard look at what you're holding onto and why. Sometimes it's a quiet form of denial, a way to pretend there's still a little bit here. But every object that carries their energy is a reminder that you haven't fully let go. Even the conversations you have with others can keep them too present in your life. It's normal to vent or reflect with friends at first, but if weeks or months later you're still bringing them up constantly, you might not be processing, you might be staying attached. At some point, it becomes necessary to shift the topic, to reclaim your life as about you, not just your relationship with them. And yes, the absence they leave will feel like a void at first, but it's a void that creates space for new thoughts, new habits, new people, and new energy. When you stop feeding your brain with constant reminders of them, you create the quiet necessary to reconnect with yourself. You begin to break the habit of emotional dependence, because that's what a breakup really is. It's not just the loss of a person, it's the disruption of a pattern. And the only way to build a new pattern is to clear the old one out of your daily life. Removing their presence is an act of self-respect. It says, I matter more than my memories of you. It says, I deserve to heal without constant disruption. And most of all, it says, this is my life again, and I get to decide who and what lives in it. When a relationship ends, especially one that meant a lot to you, it's easy to fall into the trap of idealizing the past. You start replaying the good moments in your head like a highlight reel, the laughs you shared, the times you felt seen, the intimacy you built. And while it's important to honor what was real and beautiful, it's just as important, maybe even more so, to reclaim the full narrative of the relationship, not the fantasy, not the wishful version. The truth, the mind loves stories. It wants something to make sense of what happened. And after a breakup, especially one that was sudden, messy, or left without answers, we often create a narrative that softens the blow. We paint the other person in a better light than they deserve. We take the blame for things that weren't our fault. We imagine that the relationship ended because of timing or external pressure or misunderstandings, not because it was broken or unhealthy or no longer right. This is how we stay emotionally tied to something that's already over. We edit the story to match our longing, but reclaiming the narrative means looking at the relationship with clear eyes, not cruelly, not bitterly, just honestly. It means acknowledging not just what you loved, but what you ignored, the times you didn't feel prioritized, the emotional inconsistency, the unmet needs, the ways you had to shrink yourself just to keep the peace. The compromises you made that chipped away at your self-respect. It means seeing the full picture, both the joy and the pain, and accepting that both were part of the reality. This process can feel like betrayal. You might feel disloyal for focusing on the flaws, especially if you still care about the person. But reclaiming the narrative isn't about vilifying them. It's about setting yourself free from the false version of events that's keeping you stuck. It's about shifting from what we could have been to what actually was, because only then can you start to make peace with it. Another part of reclaiming the narrative is separating who you were in that relationship from who you actually are. Breakups often come with shame. You question your worth. You wonder if you were too much or not enough. But the end of a relationship doesn't define your value. Maybe you were showing up fully while they were half in. Maybe you were honest while they were withholding. Maybe you gave everything and still weren't met with the same effort. Those truths matter. And when you retell the story from a place of self-respect, you begin to remember your strength, not just your heartbreak. You also reclaim the narrative by choosing what the relationship meant in the bigger picture of your life. Was it painful? Yes, but maybe it taught you what you won't tolerate again. Maybe it reminded you of the kind of love you truly deserve. Maybe it helped you discover parts of yourself you hadn't accessed before. Even painful relationships can hold powerful lessons, but you only see them when you stop romanticizing and start reflecting. Taking back the story doesn't erase the past, it reframes it in a way that empowers you. Instead of seeing yourself as someone who was left, hurt, or abandoned, you begin to see yourself as someone who survived, learned, and grew. The relationship becomes a chapter, not the whole book, and you are no longer at the mercy of how someone else chooses to remember it. You are the author now. You choose how this story gets carried forward. Not with regret, not with blame, but with truth and the courage to write something better next time. After a breakup, the instinct is often to dive headfirst into healing. You read the books, listen to the podcasts, follow the advice. You talk it out, cry it out, and maybe even journal like your life depends on it. And while healing is vital, it's only part of the picture. If all your energy is focused on fixing what was broken, you might miss the deeper, more transformative opportunity that's right in front of you, the chance to rediscover who you are without that relationship. This is where real change happens, when you shift your focus from just healing your heart to rebuilding your identity. A breakup doesn't just take away a person, it can take away a version of yourself that was deeply tied to them. The inside jokes, the future plans, the roles you played, those all become part of the loss. And suddenly, you're not just grieving them, you're grieving who you were with them. That kind of loss can shake your sense of self, especially if the relationship was long, intense, or defining. You might ask yourself, who am I without them? What do I even like anymore? What does my life look like now? This is why identity work matters. Healing helps you process the past, but rediscovering your identity helps you step into the future. It starts with small but intentional acts of self-reconnection. Go back to the hobbies you abandoned, not because they'll distract you, but because they remind you of your individuality. Revisit goals that had nothing to do with the relationship. Call the friends you lost touch with. Say yes to new experiences, even if they feel strange at first. All of this helps to rebuild your internal sense of me, separate from we. It's also about recognizing that you're more than your pain. Sometimes, when we're heartbroken, we wrap ourselves in the identity of the one who got hurt. And while that story might feel validating in the moment, it keeps us stuck in the past. You are not your breakup. You are not just someone who got left, or someone who made mistakes, or someone who wasn't enough. You are someone with history, desires, passions, and potential. And the sooner you start reconnecting with those parts of yourself, the sooner you stop centering your world around the person who's no longer in it. This phase is also a powerful time to redefine what love means to you, not just romantically, but personally. What does it look like to love yourself now? How do you show up for yourself when no one else is there to validate or comfort you? That's the real work, not just healing from heartbreak, but building a life that reflects your own values, boundaries, and dreams. And here's the surprising truth. When you focus on identity, healing tends to happen naturally, not because you're ignoring the pain, but because you're giving yourself something meaningful to grow toward. You're no longer just fixing what's broken, you're building something new, something better, something that's yours. So instead of waiting to feel whole again, start acting like someone who is already whole. Instead of only trying to stop the hurt, start asking, who do I want to become now? That question has power. That question moves you forward, because healing is not the finish line. It's just the beginning of remembering who you are and becoming someone even stronger, even wiser, even more you than before. One of the most empowering things you can do after a breakup isn't getting over the person, it's creating a life so full, so meaningful, and so aligned with who you truly are that their absence no longer defines your emotional landscape. It's not about pretending they never mattered, it's about building something better in the aftermath, because when your life becomes rich with purpose, passion, and peace, they stop being the center of your story and start becoming just one small chapter in a much bigger, more exciting book. In the early days of heartbreak, everything feels centered around them. Your mind constantly loops through memories, imagined conversations, and what-ifs. They live rent-free in your thoughts because your life was once woven so tightly around theirs. But here's the hard truth. That emotional grip often lingers because there's space for it too. When you're not deeply connected to your own life, it's easy to keep circling back to what was. So the antidote isn't to force yourself to stop thinking about them. The antidote is to fill your life with so much you that they slowly fade into the background. Start by pursuing things that have nothing to do with the relationship. What are the passions you neglected while you were with them? What dreams were put on hold? Go after them now. Learn that language, take that class, book that solo trip, start that business. The more you invest in things that make you come alive, the more you shift the energy from them to yourself. Because when you start focusing on building a life that excites you, you naturally stop looking over your shoulder to see if they're watching. Surround yourself with people who elevate your energy. Not just the ones who listen to your pain, but the ones who remind you who you were before the relationship and who you can be after it. Reconnect with old friends, join new communities, say yes to invitations that pull you out of your comfort zone. You'll start to see that life isn't just continuing, it's evolving. And as it does, your emotional attachment to the past starts to loosen its grip. Another powerful way to make them irrelevant is to create a vision for your future that is entirely yours. Most people unknowingly shape their future around someone else. The imagined house, the kids, the vacations, the goals all tied to a shared fantasy. Now is the time to rewrite that future. Design a life that reflects your own desires, independent of any romantic partner. What does success look like for you? What kind of lifestyle lights you up? What would your day-to-day look like if you were prioritizing you fully? The more clearly you can see that version of your life, the less space the past takes up. And remember, making someone irrelevant doesn't mean acting like they never existed. It means that they no longer have emotional power over you. It means they're no longer the reference point for your decisions, your mood, or your self-worth. You don't need to hate them. You don't need to win them back. You don't even need them to understand what they lost. The win is that you are thriving without them, not because you're trying to prove something, but because you chose to prioritize yourself. When you live a life rooted in self-alignment, one that brings you joy, growth, and fulfillment, the past naturally loses its emotional weight. You stop needing closure, attention, or even answers. You've outgrown the version of you that needed that relationship to feel complete, and in doing so, you've taken back control. That's not just healing, that's transformation, that's freedom.